Today we're talking about, and what we're going to see is we're going to get a glimpse and see the humanity of Jesus. And when we talk about the humanity of Jesus, it's often like it's easy for us to think like, well, oh, Jesus was a man, so of course, like he was a man, he was God, and he was man, and it's easy for our minds to go into the theology realm. So in theology, this is referred to as what's called, this is a really big term, you don't have to memorize it, but it's called the hypostatic union. It's this, that Jesus had both a 100% fully God nature, he was fully divine, and somehow also fully human. And so he was 100% God, 100% man, yet he was only one being. It wasn't 200%. He existed in both. And so this what's called a hypostatic union, both of these natures existed in union in one person. And so you're like, oh wow, okay, that's like kind of mind blowing. And how does that work? And you know, there's a mystery to it. But when we talk about the humanity of Jesus, we're not like this morning, what we're seeing is not like, oh, well, let's prove that he was indeed man and that he wasn't God, but that he was God too. We're not doing that. What we're looking at is the emotion of a person. And what we'll see is we're at the third saying of the cross. The third saying of the cross reveals to us Jesus's heart and his posture and his perspective of being, ready for this, of being a son. Now, all of us, this is by definition, all of us have a mother. All of us have, maybe your mom's no longer with us, maybe you still live with your mom, maybe your kids have moved out, and maybe you are a mom, but all of us have a mom. And moms, this is, I can, as a not mom, I can say this, moms are just special. It's just different. Mom is different in a good way. Mom is the person that is always near and dear to your heart, and like it's just different. And here's the proof. Like, so I'm a sports guy. I love sports. I love watching sports. I'm coaching and attempting to play sports. And one of the things that always happens in interviews with athletes after some big thing is they'll do some interview, they'll talk, and then they'll right at the camera, "Hi, Mom." Right? Have you seen this before? I'm sure you have. You know you've never heard? You've never heard one of those athletes go, "Hey, Dad, just want to say hi." I've been decades of my life watching sports, never have I heard anyone say like, "Hey, Dad, thanks so much." It's always, "Hi, Mom, love you, Mom. Shout out to my mom." And there's something different about even though, Dad's probably like, "Okay, dude, like I bought all your stuff. I coached you. I took you to practices, but like, Mom, there's something about mom, and this is true too. I can say this as a guy, and you guys know this. Generally speaking, this is probably not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not always, but for the most part, as guys, at some point you outgrow your mom. Like you are bigger than your mom, right? You are probably taller than your mom. You probably get to a point where you weigh more and you're stronger. And like my kids are at that point. Like my boys, my youngest boy, my oldest two boys, they're outgrown mom a while ago. My youngest one is right there, and it's like a whole thing. So she's like, when she gives them a hug, it's like it used to be his head at the chin, and then his head at the nose, and then it's eye to eye, and then it's over. But here's the thing. Ready for this? This is true for you too. Even though, guys, you are bigger, stronger, way more than mom, she can still take you out. It's like, that's mom. Don't mess with mom. Like, they're like, don't mess with mom. Like, she's got no fear, right? And there's something like, there's something special about mom. Jesus had a mom. I mean, we know this. We know the Christmas story. Of course, he had a mom. He was born, but when you think about like, all right, but he had a mom, and he was a son, and Mary, Jesus was her boy, her oldest boy, who at some point outgrew her and got taller and bigger and stronger and like, but that's still her boy. We're gonna see him on the cross, and Mary still sees her boy on the cross. And Jesus on the cross looks down and sees mom. That's mom. amidst all of the thing that is happening on the cross, amidst like the theological implications, the actual like timeline of events, minute by minute, and what's happening, and all of the things that happen to him, we get this moment, this snapshot where Jesus says, "Oh, but mom's here." In the midst of all of it, there's my mom. And here's the third saying of the cross, the third statement is this: "Woman, here is your son." Now, there are some practical and theological implications here, and first, your first glance at this, like the first reading of this, you go, whoa, wait a minute. He called his mom woman, right? Right? You don't do that in this house, right? Like, don't you dare call mom a woman. Like, this is the last meal you'll ever eat. But that's not what's going on here. Like this, well, in English, it's easy to see that and go, wow, that's super disrespectful. But that's the translation here is not that. So we'll look at what is going on. But Jesus is like, he's going to hand over the care of his mother because he knows this is it for him. This is it. He's literally in the last few hours, minutes even, of his life, and he sees mom. Here's what we see in John 19. Here's what it says. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, his aunt, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And his mother's name is Mary, so there's a lot of Marys. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here's your son." And to the disciple, "Here's your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. Now, John records that Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, which is funny because this is the only gospel that records this interaction, and it's written by John, who was also the disciple whom Jesus loved. It was like a phrase he kind of used for himself, which is it kind of makes sense because you're like, he probably understands, hey, I'm not the main character here. I don't want the focus to be on me, so I'm not going to put my name into the story. I'm going to tell the story without being like, hey, by the way, I'm John. I'm kind of a big deal. So he uses code, and he uses this code of like the disciple who Jesus loved, which is also funny because you're going like, of all the things you thought of, like that's what you used. By the way, I don't want to write John that. I don't want to be prideful. Like I don't want people to be like, wow. So I'll just say, oh, I don't know, Jesus loved me more than everyone else. like the one that he really loved, right? And so like, it's such a funny thing to say. He's probably not thinking that. He's probably thinking, no, I had like a different relationship with Jesus. Like I felt so close to Jesus that like I felt like I was truly deeply loved, maybe in a different way, or and so he's trying to communicate that. It comes across so funny. So he's writing this, and he's there. John is the only disciple at the cross. It's all the ladies and John, and then all the other the disciples, they're gone. They took off. They're not around. They're hiding in fear, and which again goes to prove like moms are way tougher than all the boys who like take off and hiding. And so John is there, like this is all happening. He sees this. And he writes this when he saw his mother and he saw the disciple whom he loved, John himself. He uses this language that implies deep awareness and concern, deep affection. So the language like he saw, it wasn't just like, oh, I see you, like with his eyes, but rather he recognized and has a deep concern and affection, like to look longingly and to look like with compassion on someone. So when Jesus sees his mom and sees John, he has a deep compassion that just overwhelms him, overcomes him. And Jesus, while in agony, he focuses on others. And he uses this term, and he says woman, which in the Greek is gune, and it's not like when you think of, like I hope you would never use this kind of like language, especially with your mom. You're like, woman, you're like, I hope you would never do that. But this is not that. And you read it with that tone, like, woman, here's your son. No. This is a respectful and affectionate term that's given that it's, we don't really have an equivalent. It would be like saying ma'am or lady or beloved, something like that. So he's saying it's not like woman, it's like lady. Essentially, mom, whom I deeply care about. Here's your son. He's taking my place. John is now taking my place because I don't have much longer to live. And then he says to John, here is your mother. She now is your mom because I'm not there to look after her, to take care of her. Jesus then, legally and culturally, this is significant because he gives the care of his mother to John. This is what we're going to be talking about this morning. A non-family member. So the way the culture worked was it was very patriarchal. So the men would hold property, they would kind of hold the deed, they would own land, they would own whatever livestock, whatever business, and then they would take care of the family. And so whoever the man of the house is, that's who would take care of it. And then if that man died, if the husband died, it would fall to the oldest son to now take care of the family, to take over and to make sure to manage everything because it has to go to another guy. And so Jesus naturally was that guy. So Jesus had an earthly father, Joseph. We see in Jesus' early life, Joseph is there, and then by the time he goes into ministry, Joseph's gone. So we know that he at this point has passed away. The fact that Jesus is in charge of kind of taking care of the family and taking care of mom means Joseph is gone. So Joseph has passed away. Jesus is now in charge. He's the oldest son. We also know this, that Jesus has multiple brothers. We know him by name, and it says that, it says that he has four brothers, and that his 4 brothers and sisters were there with him in another passage. So we know he has at least 2 sisters. We're never told how many. Here's what we know. Jesus has a big family. I mean, there's at a minimum 7 children. At a minimum, there are 7. Anyone got 7? A few of us? You don't want to, it's a lot of kids. Hopefully we're taking care of them right now. This is if you have 7 kids, you probably want this service to go as long as possible. I imagine. So Jesus is he's the oldest of a large family. He's now thinking, I'm out, I'm leaving, I've only got a few hours left. And so he hands over care, and the natural, the succession, kind of the next one in line would be the next brother. Naturally, that just makes sense. The next oldest brother is now seeking, and Jesus doesn't do that. He says, John, you're in charge. A non-blood related person. Whoa, wait a minute, Jesus. He's given the care now to John, and culturally, Jesus, what are you doing? And we'll see, there's good reasons why here in a second, but what we're gonna see then is this, that because Jesus does this with John and gives John the care of his mother, and based on some other things that Jesus says that we'll look at, and some things that Paul talks about, here's what we realize. What do we learn about Jesus' concern for his mother? Here's what we see. God doesn't just give you grace. He does. He gives you grace. You and I, we receive grace. We accept grace. Hopefully you are living in grace and you've been forgiven. And it's an entirely new lifestyle for you to say, I've been forgiven. I'm living in grace, no longer out in judgment. And I can live in part of the family of God. And it's awesome. It's awesome. All right. I have a freedom that I didn't have before. You have grace, but God doesn't just give you grace. Here's what we see. He gives you, ready for this? He gives you people. He gives you grace to say, I want to forgive you. I want you to be a part of the family. And then you say, yes, I want in. And then he says, great. Now guess what you get with that? A bunch of extra people in your life. And many of us go, yay. More people. Like all of those people. Yes, you get people. Here's what we see. Jesus, he calls us to see beyond ourselves. So one of the things that he does, while he's on the cross, he's being tortured. He knows he's only got a little bit left. And he's thinking not about himself, but instead he's thinking about mom and John. And his concern is not for himself, but for those that he knows he will leave behind. Paul writes about this kind of posture and attitude. He says this in Philippians chapter 2. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, have the same mind, having the same love, being one in spirit and in purpose. Here's what you're supposed to do, okay? Here's what I want you to do. Here's what being like-minded like me and having the same love, here's what this means. Ready? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, consider others better than yourself. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Paul lists out four motivating factors as to why you should do this. He says, if you have any encouragement from Christ, from being united with Jesus, if you have comfort from his love, if you have a common sharing of the Spirit, if you have tenderness and compassion, then here's what you're supposed to do, all right? So hopefully all of us would go like, yes, I want to, yes, okay, tenderness, compassion, I want to. Okay, good, all right, ready? Here's what he says. Then here's what you got to do. You get to consider, in humility, consider others better than yourself. Well, I don't really like that one. What if they're not better? No. Doesn't mean that they have to be, but you treat them that way. That you look not only to your own interests, and he doesn't say don't look to your interests, but he says don't look only to your own life, but think about other people and look at their lives as well. To think about and treat them in humility as being better than yourself, he says. Jesus, in his greatest moment of suffering, he looked beyond himself, and we see this on the cross. He looks to the care of his mother. Jesus valued others above himself. Even in agony, he prioritized compassion certainly over self-preservation. He calls us to see beyond ourselves. He's calling you to see beyond yourself, to live a life that isn't focused on you. This is hard. This is really hard because, I don't know if you know this, and if this is the first time you hear this, I apologize for breaking the news. Nobody thinks about you more than you. Did you know that? Did you know that? You are the most selfish person you know. You're the only one thinking about you as much as you do. And I'm the only one thinking about me as much as I do. So for us to then snap out of that mindset and to go, no, I want to not just think about myself, I want to intentionally, purposefully, and compassionately think about other people and in humility, consider others better than myself. That is not a natural reaction that you and I have. We have to fight for that perspective. We see this. Jesus calls us to live, to see beyond ourselves, but there's something deeper happening here. This isn't just a matter of Jesus saying, all right, I want to make sure mom's taken care of. He does. He wants to make sure mom's taken care of. But there's something else happening here on another level. Jesus isn't just doing that. He's redefining family itself. This is where it really hits us and changes like even how we interact with people, or should at least. We see this, that the cross creates a new kind of family. That Jesus' sacrifice on the cross redefines what family is and what it should be and what it could be. We see earlier in his ministry, right kind of towards the middle of his ministry, Jesus has this encounter. He's teaching in a home, and his family shows up to confront him. Here's what we read in Matthew chapter 12. It says this: While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, your mother and your brothers are standing outside wanting to speak with you. All right, so Jesus is teaching. His family shows up, and they're actually coming to confront him because they're saying, you're crazy, you can't speak like this, like what you're saying is creating trouble for our family. Like, they're coming to confront him and tell him to stop. And so, all right, they show up. They've been traveling for a few days to get to where he's at, and someone goes and says, all right, hey, your mom's here. Your mom and your brothers are here. And he certainly already knows what's coming, but also, listen, it's also mom. Like, hey, mom's here. Okay. Like, I don't know if you did this ever growing up. Like, someone come and said, like, would say to you, like, hey, mom wants you. And you're like, okay, what does her face look like? Like, what kind of tone? Like, how did she say my name? You know, like, what am I in for, right? Mom wants me? Oh, no. Like, am I in trouble, or is dinner ready? Like, what is this? And so, hey, your mom's here. And he's like, all right. And here's his response. He replied to him, who is my mother? And who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Jesus did not forget who his mom was. Who is my mother? He's not saying like, wait, hold on, wait, come, what was her name? Wait, my brothers, wait, who are they? Jesus is using this moment to redefine family, and he says, all right, let me tell you who my mother and sister and brothers are. And it's not who you think. That's my mom, and those are my actual brothers. But what I'm doing here is so much bigger than just the blood family. That I am redefining family, and he says, here's my family, ready? Here's my mother and brother, sister. Anyone who does the will of my Father, you're a part of my family. You're in. Whoa. Jesus, this is like, he's not rejecting his family, he's redefining what family is. He certainly, of course, cares for his mom. And what's interesting is at this point in his ministry, so in Jesus' entire life on earth, his brothers didn't believe in him. We're told this in John chapter 7, verse 5. It says, even his brothers didn't believe him. So even at the cross, at the time of his death, there's no mention of his brothers being there. They're probably like, this crazy brother of ours finally gets what he deserves. And mom is like, well, she's probably going, guys, are you coming? You coming to the, and they're like, no, why would we go to that? Why would we go? He's disgraced our family name. Why would we do that? And mom, you shouldn't go. And mom, like moms would do, there's no way I can't be there for my son. I will be there. No one can stop me. Any of you gonna stop me? I'd like to see you try. And they're probably like, dang, mom, okay. They aren't there. None of them, like we don't get any records of any of his family other than mom believing in him until a very particular event, until after the resurrection. One of the most well-known brothers of Jesus is a guy named James. James wrote a book of the Bible. It's called James. It's how you know which one he wrote. He was a brother of Jesus. He didn't become a Christian until after Jesus died and rose again. Jesus' entire life, he's like, my brother's crazy. This isn't real. He's just, I'm sorry. We're trying to rein him in. And then something happens, and we see that it's probably within a couple months after Jesus' death and resurrection that James becomes a Christian. And he does so because my brother resurrected. That changes things. If you have a sibling who is killed and then comes back to life, you might start listening to what they have to say. And James, at that point, recognizes and realizes, oh man, I've missed it. And he becomes a Christian, and then he becomes a leader in the Jerusalem church, and then he writes a book of the Bible. Like he goes on this trajectory where you're like, wow, you totally had a life change. But in this moment, he's not a follower, he's not a believer, he doesn't believe Jesus. So naturally, it would make sense that Jesus is going, I want to hand over my care to someone who actually is in, like, not the blood family, but in my Father's family, John. He hands over care to John, not to any of the actual brothers. Jesus he does this, and he's creating a new community. He's handing over the care not to his biological brother, but a spiritual brother in John. And he does so by creating this thing that ends up being called the church. And he doesn't create an institution. This is one of my biggest frustrations that I just have to just deal with, and I just experience, and it's fine. The idea that most people who don't go to church or don't follow God or don't want to believe or don't have any kind of faith at all, if you ask them what is it? What is it? Have you ever been to church? Do you like church? You ever been to church? You want to go to church? And they'll say something like this. You probably have friends who have said things like this. Well, I'm just not a fan of organized religion. I don't like organized religion. Organized religion is what's wrong with the world. Organized religion is caused every war that's ever started, and they go on this rant, and you're like, all right, organized, I can't ever see myself being a part of an organized religion. I just don't like organized religion. Now, your response should be this. Neither do I. I'm not a fan of organized religion. I don't like it at all, actually. And they'll usually say, don't you work at one? Aren't you paid by an organized religion? Like, isn't that, like, when you get your, like, how does that work? Well, but listen, church is not an organized religion. According to Jesus, church is a family. We are a family. As much as we say, like, I go to this church and I belong to this church and I'm, and like, here's the set of rules at this church and, what does your church allow? What does your church want? It's like, no, hold on. This is not, you and I are not involved in a set of right and wrong, of rules and do's and don'ts. We are in a family. This is a family. And instead of thinking of church as like an organized religion that you come to and they tell you what to do and it's like this form of mind control, stop. In many ways, we've earned that reputation of the church being judgmental, not compassionate. I get that. But listen, at its truest form, church is a family. You and I are in a family. And what's true of every family? It's full of people that you love and weirdos. You got weird people in your family, and you love the weird people anyways because you're part of your family. And you know what this church has? People that we love and some oddballs. We have some weird ones. And if you're like, everyone looks normal to me. And when I say weird, like we're all weird in one way or another, but listen, we have, like, it's messy. Family's messy, and it's full of drama, and it's full of people who don't get along and argue, and yet you all sit at the table, and it's like, hey, it's Thanksgiving, we're here. We're like, all right, but don't sit me next to them. Fine, but eat your turkey. We're like, yeah, we're a family, and we love each other. Church is a family, and Jesus, he redefines what family is, and that this bond isn't by blood, but it's by faith. It's by what we believe. It's by a common, and we, there may be times in your life where you felt this, where you seem to have an instant connection with someone simply because they're a Christian. They're a follower of Jesus, and you don't know anything else about them. You might not even know their name. You can be in another country, and there's a language barrier, and you find out someone's a Christian. If you're like on a mission trip, and you're going somewhere, and you meet like a family, and they're like, oh, we're believers, and it's like an instant, oh, wow, okay, that's my brother or my sister. Like, I don't know you, but I know you, but you're family. And this happens with us too. When we find out people are Christians, it's like, oh, you're one of me. I don't even know you, but you're in, like, we're in the family. This happened to me yesterday. I was getting a haircut. How do I look? Looks pretty good. I hope it looks good. I can't see it. I don't know. And this lady who's doing the haircut, she we're talking about, just life, whatever, all kinds of stuff. And she says, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a pastor at a church. And she's like, I thought I recognized you. I'm like, oh, I'm a New Hope. And she's like, yeah, I've been there a few times. She's like, I knew it. I knew I recognized you. I'm like, oh, awesome. And then it was an instant connection. I don't even know her name. I remember it now. She told me later. I don't want to share it. Well, do you want to know? Nah, I don't know. Are you in here? Did you come in here yesterday? And she goes, you know what's funny? I just had two other people that were before you that came in, and they were Christians, and it was so cool. We got to talk about, the new Chosen movie episodes that are coming out, and she's like, and you're here, and she's like, and that person over there, they're a Christian too, and she's like, and that one, I'm trying to get them to come to church, so like pray for them. And it's like, it became this like, oh, we're like strategizing a mission right now, cool, and it was an instant connection of like, oh wow, okay. I see you, you see me. And you've probably had those kinds of experiences because we don't know each other. We don't have similar like experiences. Our lives don't really intersect. It's the first time ever, but we're family. She's my sister. She's my sister. You are my sisters and brothers. And Jesus redefines family. And he says, and then Paul later develops this idea in Romans, and he spends a lot of time in Romans talking about this. And it's an incredible, probably the single greatest like living illustration that we can have with regard to our involvement in God's family and God's kingdom, and that's this, adoption. He says we are adopted into God's family, and that even as us Gentiles can be engrafted into the family tree of God. Adoption is you are now a part of the family, legally, a part of the family, not by blood, but by choice. That's different. But by love and a decision to say, I want to be a part of this family, and we want you to be a part of this family. And God says, I want you to be a part of my family by choice. So who in our church needs family? Do you, when you come to church, do you see people, the people in this church, as brothers and sisters? These are family members. As the kids of other people, as your nieces and nephews, your spiritual nieces and nephews, and making sure, I want to love them. I don't know them at all, but man, they're in the family. It is, again, this is a hard switch to turn on, because it is so easy instead for us to, instead of seeing brothers and sisters and family members, it's so easy to come into church and to complain and to notice what's wrong. And instead of thinking like, oh, that's awesome, they're here, we do this. Who's sitting in my seat? And that's my chair. Every week, that's my chair. It's got my shape to it. I've sat in it so long. And who dares come and sit in my seat, right? And it's like, hey, aren't you glad that they're here at church? I'm so glad that they're here. Just pick a different row, okay? Instead, if you think of, the next time someone sits in your seat, just think, that's my brother or my sister. That's that could be my mother, spiritual mother. Are you gonna kick mom out of your seat? Heck no, right? Mom's kicking you out of her seat. We see this, Jesus redefines family, but he doesn't just redefine family, he then does something else, and he calls us to take responsibility. He calls John to take responsibility for his mom. We see that Paul writes about us being responsible for each other. We see this, Jesus entrusts us with one another. So Jesus, he wants us to think outside of ourselves, beyond ourselves. He creates a new kind of family that we are part of, and then he says, now in this family, you are actually responsible for people. I want you. I'm gonna entrust you, like you are gonna be entrusted with other people's lives. Whoa, really? Okay. Look at what Paul writes in Galatians, where he talks about how we should interact with our spiritual family. He starts by saying, in Galatians chapter 6, he says, brothers and sisters, he's used family language. If someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. He says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Let's look at this. So he uses this phrase, if someone is caught in sin, someone is stuck in a sinful behavior, he says, you who are with the Spirit should restore them gently. So two things. First, this restore gently, this language is actually medical terminology, and it's the medical term for resetting a bone. You reset a bone, you restore it gently. My wife's a nurse. She works at St. Charles, who works on the ortho-neural floor, which is bones and bones and brains, I like to say. And so they deal with a ton of broken bones. I mean, almost daily she's got patients with broken bones. And the way, if you've ever broken a bone, you know this. You reset a bone gently. Sometimes with surgery, sometimes, with it's like, all right, we're gonna put this, and then we got a cast, and then we gotta manage your pain, and it's gonna take time, and that bone heals slowly over time. It isn't just a quick send, all right, fixed, go home. I mean, all right, we probably gotta do a cast. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into fixing bones. And bones are painful, you know this. Anytime if you ever had a broken bone, you know instantly, this is terrible. This is terrible. And here's what you don't want. You don't want someone coming to help you who's just be like, give me that finger. Let's just put it back in place. You're like, well, don't touch me, right? Oh, your arm's just folded down. All right, I can fix that. We'll just stick it right back in place. Like, no. I want someone who knows what they're doing, and I want someone who's gonna be super gentle. I know I look like a big tough guy, and I am, but don't touch me. Please don't hurt me. He says, you who are spiritual, listen, you restore them gently. They're caught in sin. This is not a calm, like hard and fast, and you need to do this or else, and like tough love. I'm just gonna tell them as it is. He says, you have to do this gently. You're trying to restore them and to heal them from something that is trapped them, that they're caught in. And then he gives this preface. He says, this should be done by those who live by the Spirit. Here's another way to say this: those who are spiritually mature. Those who can handle it. Not by everyone. Not everyone in your life has the right to call you out in your stuff. But listen, some should. There should be some people in your life who have the right and authority to tell you when you're an idiot. There should be. There's people in my life that I'm like, hey, do it gently, okay? Just be nice. But also, if I'm wrong on this, tell me I'm wrong. If you don't have anyone like that in your life, you are missing out on this. Like your life might actually be going a direction it shouldn't be. And then he says this, but watch yourself, you may be tempted. This should not be done by someone who is also tempted by the same things. If you have someone who struggles with alcohol, they're probably not the person to keep you accountable and to be the person to like help you with your alcoholism. They're not the person who should be like showing up at the bar to help you out and take you home. If that's you, like, all right, hey, I struggle in this area. Okay, you can help certainly help disciple someone, be a sponsor, but there are some things that you should limit yourself to. Knowing that this may be a problem for you, you should know that. This is why he says you've got to be spiritually mature here, because sin has a way of just multiplying, of just taking like everything it touches, it just envelops and just ruins. So he says, you watch yourself, like the spiritually mature, restore them gently, but watch yourself. And he says, but we are supposed to carry each other's burdens. And in doing so, fulfill the law of Christ, the Jesus creed. Love God and love others. Love your neighbor as yourself. He says, this is how you do it. By helping them when they're caught in their struggles. And by being there, like being the person who can help take on their burdens. Ooh. Carry each other's burdens. And then he says, but there's something that will get in the way of all of this, and that's pride. If someone thinks there's something and they're not, they deceive themselves. And he says, well, listen, you take pride, you can take pride in yourself and be like, all right, and then he says this, but don't you dare get caught in the comparison trap. He says, don't compare yourselves to someone else, he says. You and I, like if like comparison was an Olympic sport, man, you'd win the gold. You're so good at it. You're good at it, and I'm good at it. We are so good at comparing ourselves, our lives to other people, and he says, don't do that. Instead, live in such a way where you say, this is my life, this is what God has for me. I'm being faithful with what he has for me, specifically where he's put me and the people he's put in my life, and I'm happy everyone else has their life. I don't need to compare myself to anyone else, and instead, I'm gonna be faithful to what he has for me, and I'm gonna care about the people he's put in my life. Awesome, all right, okay, I can use that. I can use someone who doesn't think that there's something when they're not, someone that's in humility, treats others better than themselves, but also understands God has a plan for them and has like put people in their life specifically for them without comparing themselves to everyone else. All right. This is the kind of person he can use. Now this is also something that we have to recognize. Jesus modeled what Paul's talking about, that being responsible for each other. Jesus, he calls John to carry on and to carry the burden of literally for the rest of his life of Mary, and the rest of Mary's life now, she's with John and he's taking care of her, and this is now Jesus put me in charge, and I'm sure they had to go through a process of healing, both of them together, right? The next day, the next week, the next month, probably crying and reminiscing and talking, what are we gonna do? And you know, she's got to move now and be with John in like a new house, and like it's like a whole new lifestyle, and a year in, still thinking about Jesus. John is now, he's preaching and he's traveling, and so he's gone, and then he comes back and for the rest of her life, she is now like, all right, John is the one taking care of me. This was quite a commitment that Jesus places on John. Now here's the deal: the church The church should be, we are a family. We are called along to walk alongside one another, to love and support each other. And I'm gonna say something now that is, I don't think it's controversial, but you probably will, and maybe you won't like it. I'm sure some of you won't. It's fine. We can't be right all the time. You need the church. You need church. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you realize and recognize how much you need church. You need church. Church is a family. Church is not a building. It's not like you have to come to this church or else. No. But you need, if you're a follower of Jesus, you need to be in a family of believers who are a part of your life, who are iron sharpened iron, who are encouraging you, who maybe there are people who will even like call you out and like point things out and like, all right, I need encouragement, but I also might need to be told I might need some gentle criticism. Okay, you need that. You need the church. Now I hope you don't disagree with that. I hope that's fair. All right, now here's the part that maybe you won't like. You need the church more than it needs you. You need the church more than the church needs you. Now I say that not as like to be provocative. Honestly, there should be a level of humility that we have when we're at church to recognize this is not about our personal preferences. I meet with a lot of people, and it's part of I love it. I enjoy it, and it's not always enjoyable. Like the conversations aren't always wonderful and nice. By the time it gets to me and someone wants to meet, it's probably because there's an issue and it hasn't been dealt with. And all right, well, let's talk about it. And I've met with plenty of people who decided to leave our church, and you can leave a church there's all kinds of reasons people leave churches. And they'll often, first I thank them. Hey, thanks for meeting. Most time people just leave, they don't meet. And so thanks for this opportunity to even talk about this. And there's been a number of times where some people have said like, here's what we want in a church. Here's what we think should be like. Here's what we think you should do. And they list out all this stuff. And is that going to be this kind of church or not? We'll go somewhere else. Okay, so let me just give you some advice, friendly advice from Uncle Brandon, okay? If you go into anyone's office and give them an ultimatum, I'll just speak for myself. If you come in and give me an ultimatum, we want church to be like this or else. It doesn't matter which staff member you meet, we will pick the or else. Like there's no one here who says, this is what you should do this or we're leaving. Those are the moments, and I'll be honest with them, and I tell them often, I've had a number of these conversations where I said, I'll say what no one else will say to you. I'll lovingly share what people maybe are nervous to share, but apparently I'm never gonna see you again anyway. So here we go. You need church more than this church needs you. There is not a person in this room, myself included, that is bigger than the mission of this church. There's not a person that if they leave, if they move or they decide to switch churches, where we go, what are we gonna do Sunday? How are we gonna do our ministries this week? What's gonna happen with our kids being discipled? They left. There's not a person here, myself included. There is no one who comes to a church and says, this is what I want my experience to be. I need you to meet my needs. Listen, people leave this church and it's fine. And when I say church, by the way, I'm not meaning like New Hope Church. You need to be a part of any church. I don't care. It could be find a church in town. If it's not this one, that's fine. But you need a church. I know I've met with people and they just stop church altogether. And it's like, oh my goodness. COVID was a big problem in this area because a lot of people stopped going to church and then just never came back. Never came back. People I know, friends of mine, and I will go out to lunch with them and see them, randomly. Maybe we'll go to coffee, and they'll tell me. I've had two different guys tell me, yeah, my girls, they really want us to go back to church, but I don't know. It's just, our lives kind of got busy, and I'm hearing this going like, oh man, you need church so bad. You need to be in church so much more than we need you. The mission of Jesus continues whether you are sitting in the seat or not. It's moving forward. You need family. You need it. You need to be a part of a family. If not this family, find a different one. That's fine. But you have to be a part of a family. And The church, you need people in your life. You need a family. You need the church way more than the church needs any one of us. Does that make sense? That may hurt a little. You may not even like it. I don't like it. I want to be needed. You want to be needed. Like people leave and they often leave angry and they're like, you're going to feel it. I've had people like threaten all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I'm always sad. When people leave, I'm sad, but I'm also, all right, you opened up another seat for someone else. We can reach someone else. All right, we're on a mission here. And I like, what would it look like? The challenge for us is, what would it look like for you, for us, for me, if instead of seeing the church as a program, as a service, as like an event, we said, no, this is family. These people that you see in the lobby that are, in line for coffee that are making you wait extra long, that's your brother. That's your sister. The people who can't figure out the check-in system for the kids and you're just standing back there like, what's going on? Hey, that's mom you're complaining about, all right? We are a family, brothers and sisters in Jesus. So who in your life needs your care and attention? Who has God put in your life? If God doesn't just give you grace, he gives you people. Who are the people he's put in your life that he says, all right, you're gonna be family for them? Not blood family, but spiritual, you're gonna be family for these people. How can you embrace the church as family and not just an event? And who is God calling you to carry a burden for? What is God calling in you, for you specifically? Who are the people? There are plenty of people that I love and cherish in this church because they are investing in my kids, because they're leaders in my kids' life. They're small group leaders and they're Bible study leaders and they're even on, in Mexico with two of my boys right now. And I'm like, man, I am so grateful that we're a part. I want that. We need that. My family needs to be a part of this church. You need people in your life and you can be that for someone else's life. Who is God putting in your life that he's saying, all right, I want you to be spiritual family for this person or these people or this small group or this Bible study? God doesn't just give you grace. He gives you people. Will you stand with me? And then I'll pray for us and then we'll worship here together. So Lord, thank you that we are a part of a family, that this is not organized religion. This isn't you didn't die, Jesus, to set up some institution, to set up some set of rules and do's and don'ts. You came to set up your family. God's family here on earth, your kingdom come. Help New Hope Church be a family to those who are here, to recognize and to see ourselves not as a business, not as an organization, but as a family, full of just messy people and issues and conflict, yet as a family, we all love each other through it. We love you, Lord. We worship you now. We pray this in Jesus' name.